Exactly. I was told that the live is working and everything.
Okay. Hello. Good morning. Bonjour. So today we have a representation of indigenous people, youth, and also CBD Alliance. And the topic that the delegates, would like to bring to your notice is nature-based solution and nature-positive approaches, which are being proposed by powerful interest for inclusion in the global biodiversity framework. And to talk about more about these issues, I welcome the delegates. So first, I welcome Thomas Joseph, who is from the Hoopa community from the United States. He's an indigenous from the IPLCs, Indigenous People and Local Communities. So may I request Thomas Joseph to address the session.
Thank you. My name is Thomas Joseph. I'm a Hoopa Valley tribal member. My people have resided on our ancestral lands for over 10,000 years in the Six Rivers National Forest of what's now called Northern California. My people also come from the Sierra Nevada mountain range of Payalunada, which is both locations are probably some of the most diverse places in California because of the reciprocal relationship Indigenous peoples have continued to practice in those areas of California. I am also the carbon policy educator with the Indigenous Environmental Network, and we're here today to talk about nature-based solutions and how it's not a climate solution and it's a public relations scheme. That the mainstream approach to nature-based solutions monetize the financial nature by generating carbon offset credits for polluters to purchase so that they can continue to make dubious net zero emissions claims. The legacy of colonial powers continues through nature-based solutions and conservation NGOs, large development institutions, and international financial institutions and governments. That privatized sectors are all pushing for nature-based solutions. You know, when we continue to commodify our Mother Earth as a mechanism to be used to solve the climate crisis that we're facing, or to protect biodiversities, we're using the same concepts and steps that has got us in the climate chaos in the first place. What we really needing to do is a system change and understand that nature-based solutions is just a continuation of colonialism to commodify our Mother Earth and to access unceded territories of Indigenous peoples. When we think of the biodiversities of the earth, there's 80% of the hands of Indigenous peoples. There's a reason for that. They are greater at protecting and defending our Mother Earth and those biodiversities. And they use a different system base, a different knowledge-based structure that goes back thousands of years. That's older than any Western science programming that we now start to use. And the traditional knowledge of those peoples need to continue to be protected and uplifted. And also, you know, when we're here at COP15, there's a lot of talk about fighting. You know, like we're still fighting to make sure that FPIC is a thing. We even hear that it's being taken out in some areas. And it's very concerning that after the UNDRIP has passed, that we're still fighting for the same base regulation and not understanding that actually Indigenous peoples needed a greater opportunity to manage their ancestral lands outside of these market-based mechanisms like nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions is a term used to justify large-scale and resource grabs. And behind the push for nature-based solutions are government working with the private sector to position themselves as necessary players in fighting climate change. So it's a way of like inviting the private sector into unceded Indigenous territories. Nature-based solutions cannot possibly result in securing Indigenous people's self-determination, territorial rights, or jurisdictional authority. What are nature-based solutions? Nature-based solutions is vaguely defined as terms capturing a wide range of practices that revolve around an idea of using nature to solve climate change and biodiversity loss. Fundamental to the concept is the capacity of nature ecosystems to sequester atmospheric carbon dioxide and provide various other services. However, NBSs are not actually nature-based, but human-made through the process of commodification and enhancement, and more recently, the manipulation and exploitation. Increasingly, MBSs are being used by corporations to justify continued fossil fuel extraction and business as usual. And so it's vital that we understand and know that even though they have a fancy name, nature-based solution, they're just commodifying the indigenous practices and indigenous knowledges that have existed for thousands of years, and that there is a huge difference between real climate solutions that's going to come from the traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples and protecting our biodiversities, and just fancy terms and mechanisms like NBS, which is just a continuation of capitalism and colonialization. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Now I request Mirna Fernandez from Global Youth Biodiversity Network to talk more on this aspect.
Thank you so much. I will now continue explaining a little bit of our concerns around the term nature positive. First of all, I want to say that I am from the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. We represent the youth mechanism, the youth participation mechanism to the Convention on Biological Diversity, representing more than 50 national chapters and 300 youth organizations, having a general reach to almost 1 million young people. So for us, it's very important that we represent the voices of youths when we are here in this process, and that we have a consulted positions on what are their concerns about terminologies and things that are going to be in the framework. And that is why we decided to make more research and to understand deeper what is the concept of nature positive. We joined forces with Friends of the Earth to do a joint research and understand what is inside the term. And we are very worried about some potential gaps and risks that come with this terminology, and especially guiding the whole implementation of the JBF. First of all, what is nature positive? What does it mean? The term as it is, it's conflicting for us because it is composed of two words that are conflictive and disguising. First, nature is something that is not defined in the CBD, as opposed to the term biodiversity that is clearly defined. When we talk about biodiversity, we talk about ecosystems, species, and genetic diversity and the benefits it provides to the people, while nature has been used widely already for greenwashing and cooptation of corporations. Secondly, the term positive is also misleading because it might get us to the idea that it is an optimistic approach to the future. But in reality, this positive is the outcome of a mathematical exercise. It is, we are resting, subtracting nature from a place and adding other type of nature to another place. So in the end, our general outcome is positive. It's like we lose 30 hectares of forest here, but we do a reforestation a project of 40, so minus 30 plus 40, overall 10 positive. And this is the kind of terminologies, carbon neutral or neutral, net zero, net gain. All of these relative approaches are directly related to offsetting and have been used for offsetting climate and biodiversity since the 70s. This is not new. These are not new concepts. Offsetting has a lot of problems. Carbon offsetting didn't lead us anywhere in the climate commitments because we're still very far from reaching the ideal scenario of avoiding the climate crisis. But with biodiversity, it's even worse because we are not comparing carbon with carbon. We are comparing ecosystems that are not really comparable. If we lose ecosystem and its functions and the services it provides to communities, that is not replaceable. And science has showed us that we cannot really restore completely highly complex ecosystems, like forest ecosystems and marine ecosystems, cannot be recovered, and they cannot, and the science and practice of ecosystem restoration will not be able to achieve what is needed to restore to reach all these crazy offsetting goals that they are proposing. It is a language that is strongly being pushed from the private sector and from very rich governments, but it's a concept that has not been consulted and it's not being developed in partnership with women, indigenous peoples, local communities, and youths. And for us, a transformative change would mean that we have rights-based approaches, equity, and justice at the core of the global biodiversity framework. And we have concepts that are clearly communicable to our communities. For us, this is the most important thing, not communicable to the private sector or to the companies, but having concepts that are clear and that speak to our communities. That's why we were pushing for the integrity of ecosystems, for including the future generations and all life on Earth in the mission, and for rights-based approach in the most important targets. So we do believe that there is a lot of risk, and we don't want these kind of approaches to be part of a framework that is supposed to solve the biodiversity crisis, because we don't have another 10 more years to bring the false solutions. We cannot wait until a post-2030 global biodiversity framework to address the biodiversity crisis, because we need the real solutions now.
Thank you, Mirna. Now I request Nelly Marian from CBD Alliance to address.
Thank you very much, Bharat. I would like to bring a bit together the concept nature-based solutions, about which Thomas already talked, and the concept nature positive, about which Mirna talked. If we look at nature-based solutions, we wonder, solutions for what? Actually, originally, it was referred to as nature-based climate solutions. Here in the Biodiversity Convention, we don't need nature to be a solution for nature. That doesn't make sense. It's a circular thinking. Why is nature-based solutions being proposed here? Actually, biodiversity is being put at the service of climate. Now, if it were at the service of climate as such, that would be great. But basically what we are seeing is it's being put at the service of climate offsetting, so that the big industrial entities, a corporation, that they can keep on emitting, and then they claim they can be neutral because they are doing nature-based solutions, which means offsetting of their emissions. But there is no reduction in the emissions of the corporations themselves. So this is very problematic. Just if you look at the climate science and if you look at the ecological integrity, Mirna has already mentioned difficulties with also the human rights aspects of that, and I'm sure that our other colleague here will talk quite a bit more on that. But I just want to, for now, I want to point to the inconsistency of that. Also, Mirna mentioned it in nature positive, but also in nature-based solutions. Again, it's completely not clear what nature means. Is nature a real ecosystem? Is nature monoculture tree plantations? Is nature even technological processes such as gene drives or geoengineering, things like that? All of that has been branded as nature-based solutions. So we're getting a lot of solutions which, according to my basic feeling, are not natural at all. Now, even more worrying it is when we start comparing this with the climate solution, so-called, if we compare that with the biodiversity, because here in the convention, we are seeing nature positive as the proposal for the mission. So that's an overall thing we want for people want, not we, but many different, many powerful countries and companies do want nature positive as the outcome, the overall outcome for the CBD. This is based upon the concept of nets. You lose some ecosystems, no matter how many, as long as you restore some others. The restoration most often doesn't work. But also when you look at nature positive, the plan is to be positive by the end of the decade. Hopefully, that's a bit of a dream. It is clear that the nature neutrality, how much you lose, how much you win, would be only there by the end of the decade in the best of the cases. Now, if you compare that, we're going to offset all the land, and then you compare it with the climate convention, where all the countries together have put in their nationally determined contributions, which all of them have offsetting, and all of them need a lot of land to offset, a lot of new ecosystems supposedly. But here in this convention, we are not planning for that. So there's a complete inconsistency in these both plans. And both of them are based upon the idea that actually what is in this convention can be solved by the other one, and making sure that actually corporates can have the possibility to keep on emitting and to keep on polluting and to keep on destroying ecosystems, always with the promise that it will be offset by somebody else somewhere else and not their responsibility. So we see this as hugely problematic just in terms of environmental integrity, not to say how many really very bad impacts this has on the ground for indigenous peoples, for local communities, etc. But I will leave my other colleague to speak on that one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nelly. Now, I think our colleagues have spoken about nature-based and nature-positive very clearly. Now we have another very amazing colleague from Samoa who has witnessed these things at the grassroots level, and she is here to share her experience. So, on that note, I welcome Marinda Immaculata Tagilima from Global Youth Biodiversity Network. Marinda?
Good morning, everyone. Yes, my name is Marinda Immaculata Tangilima, and I come from Samoa, a very small island in the Pacific Islands. And we are at the front line of climate change impacts. And for us, biodiversity loss is considered mostly as an impact of climate change and biological control and globalization. And so for us, nature-based solutions are considered to be useful as a way to mitigate and adapt to climate change. So for us, it is acceptable. Like, it's being pushed and it's being initiated, and the community supports it. And coming here and learning about nature positive and its affiliation with biodiversity loss, I think it's safe to say that we need to have some reconsiderations. And I'll just explain a little about how nature-based solutions work in my country, in our community. We are being pushed for nature-based solutions, as I said before, to adapt to climate change. And an example would be a beach owner growing mangroves along the coastline. Now, for us in the Pacific Islands, the main source of income for us is tourism and agriculture. And if the beach owners grow these mangroves along the coastline, it won't make a good beach. So it will halt the tourism sector if that really happens. And another one would be planting trees in the cities, the already concrete cities. So honestly, as a youth from there, it's unrealistic. It doesn't pose concise outcomes, and it really needs to be reconsidered. So for biodiversity and we really need to think of ways that could really save what we have, because we don't have much. Yeah, as a small community, there's not much diversity in our lands, but we like to cherish. We love to protect whatever we have. So what we need is actions. What we need is inclusion. What we need is transformative education. What we need is gender responsiveness and gender equality. That is what we need. And we don't need more sugarcoating. We don't need sweet nothings to put us to sleep, because we're very much awake and we're very much observing everything that is going on. And in regards to nature-based solutions and nature positive, we need to stop making the sectors exploit this concept in making us believe that this is achievable. Like, yes, like it's not about being optimistic. And this really puts people on the edge of thinking that if we say we don't really support, not support, but we're like in between with nature positive because of its ambiguity. And because a lot of people are thinking, oh, nature positive, we should do this, we're being positive towards nature. And if we don't do this, it means we're not being positive towards nature, which is not entirely true. So for us, it would be really nice if an outcome of this COP15 is useful and very much achievable, so that we can really do what we're here for, what our purpose is, and that is to conserve our biodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marinda. Before we have some Q&A, Joseph, you have an article to share with you.
Thank you. And thank you, colleagues, for being in this presentation. I just want to say real quick that COP15 must ensure that geoengineering, including large-scale technology inventions that might be referred to as nature-based solutions, are explicitly excluded from Biodiversity Conference. There's a petition or a letter here that we're asking organizations to sign on to. There's already 90 people that have signed on to it. And so this will be passed out for my colleagues that are in the back of the room. Make sure you grab one, and also a Hoodwink book that dives more deeply into what nature-based solutions are. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Yes, thank you to all the delegates here who spoke about nature-based and nature positive. And now the session is open for question and answers. Yes.
Hi, Orla Dwyer from Carbon Brief. My question is for the first speaker, but I'd also be really interested to hear from anyone else on the panel on this as well. My first question is, around Target 8 and the other target that's related to nature-based solutions, what would be your ideal outcome for it in the final GBF? Do you want nature-based solutions to be removed from the text? Do you prefer the term ecosystem-based approaches? Which is preferable for you? And also, do you feel included in the talks at COP15 generally, and also in relation to nature-based solutions? Thank you.
Thank you. My ideal, since you asked for the ideal, would be nature-based solutions to be taken out. Is that going to happen? Probably not. And so it's very important that in this moment that we're in, that we make sure that we understand that we can't continue to ask for the bare minimum, which is FPIC. And that's what we're doing right now. And so it's important that we continue to make sure that that's implemented, and to make sure that countries understand the importance of indigenous knowledge not to be commodified, and that we don't use nature-based solutions as a carpet, or as a mechanism for markets. That we don't use nature-based solutions as carbon offsets or methods to be used to offset greenhouse gases. And that we make sure that also that nature-based solutions aren't being used in place of real climate solutions. And that and I think that those things right there, if they were implemented, would be also ideal. But it's important that they're not used as offsets, and that you're not going to take out biodiversity so you can implement a project for a forest offset, or for a carbon, or a nature-based offset project. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with the points that my colleague said. We also prefer that the concept of nature-based solutions is taken out, not only from Target 8, but in the BB section also the concept is mentioned. But how is it mentioned here? It's only the concept of nature-based solutions without any safeguards, without any principles for the implementation. because these have not been developed or even discussed yet, while the ecosystem approach is something that has been agreed already in the CBD and has 12 principles for implementation. Among these 12 principles, one of them is to prioritize the integrity of the ecosystems in the implementation of the ecosystem approach, while the current standards that are being measured or apply yet to nature-based solutions don't take into account the integrity of ecosystems. They talk about a net gain in ecosystems. So that justifies more offsetting approaches.
Yes.
Yes. Well, as my colleagues, I would also quite strongly want nature-based solutions to be out of the text. And I want to say something broader about Target 8, which in my view, well, in our view, really focuses way too much on what does biodiversity contribute to climate. And it does not focus on what a climate target in this convention should focus about. We are in a biodiversity convention. We need to focus on what is the impact of, well, many different sectors, agriculture, etc., etc. But in Target 8, we need to focus on what is the impact of climate and of climate policies on biodiversity. And I'm hugely lacking that, and I'm really seeing that there's a lot of push towards what it is that the CBD can do for the climate convention. And I think that's just the logic opposite way. It really needs to be turned around. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelly. Yes. Any question? We can take one question.
Hi, excuse me, Skylar Perkins with Regenerate Media, and thanks a lot for your talk. I'm wondering if you felt that there was a true intention to, say, reduce productivity and consumption globally and actually take steps that would be necessary to protect nature. And if you felt indigenous peoples were being honored as protectors of nature. In this context, are you comfortable with market mechanisms? Or that's probably a simple enough way to put it.
It's different ideologies. We can't continue to commodify our Mother Earth. When we put a price on carbon, then there also implements the idea of ownership of that carbon. And so we can't use capitalistic measures to address climate change. So I would not feel comfortable with market-based mechanisms being approached to address climate change. It's what got us into this mess, and it's not going to get us out of this mess. And it keeps our focus on what's important for humans, which is economy, versus really protecting the biodiversities of the planet. And so when we're able to shift away from market-based mechanisms, then we can really start thinking about real solutions that's going to protect the biodiversities of our Mother Earth, versus how can we make sure our elite countries of the global north continue to stay in an elite status versus the protection of what really needs to be protected. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Thomas, for already bringing the indigenous view on that, which I think is very, very important. Just to state the environment integrity of all these ecosystems, of all these offsetting systems, it just does not work. And really, it gives the possibility for any corporation to keep on doing emitting, destroying ecosystems, etc., because they have the possibility to offset. And that's really what we are seeing. And there is not a change in behavior of the corporate sector, and that is what we really need. And that's just not on the table. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this. You want to say? Oh, yes, please.
For us, the nature and the environment is our mother, and commodifying it would feel like you're selling your mother away, which is not very nice. And so, and the fact that the business sector, they justified the commodifying of nature by saying that they are doing or they are supporting or they are funding nature positive and nature-based solutions is not good. And I don't like that personally. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all the panelists here. and once again for sharing your information and knowledge about this topic. So we are here to solve the biodiversity crisis, but not through nature-based solutions and nature positive. Thank you so much for attending this press conference. Thank you.